Chapter 5, the physical connection. When we start working with kinesiology, we have to remember that we are spiritual bodies in a physical world. So we're working in the physical realm here. We begin our study of movement, how we move through life. Kinesiology is the study of movement, by focusing on the muscles. So each muscle performs a unique task, and it works together with other muscles, either working with them or in opposition to them. Contraction works within a fulcrum and lever system to allow the movement of the bones and joints. So what we mean there is the elbow bending is like a fulcrum. It's utilizing muscles that pull on the bone to cause the joint to bend. Muscles can only pull. Muscles can't push. So when a muscle shortens, typically the insertion moves towards the origin, which is what we see when we bring the brachioradialis up. You know, so we're in this position here and the muscle shortens and it comes up. So it brings the insertion here in the thumb towards the origin up here. So we've got four main terms when we think about muscles: the prime mover or the agonist. This is the muscle that's in the best position to bring about a specific body movement. So when we actually set out a muscle test, we are always testing the prime mover when we're doing that muscle test. The prime mover acts directly to produce the desired movement. When we place the muscle into the starting position for muscle testing, we're isolating the action so that we can look at that muscle as best we can. The synergist muscles are like the helpers. They act simultaneously with the prime mover. They add additional force. They reduce undesirable movements that occur as the prime mover contracts. So when we talk about recruiting muscles, often the muscles that are recruiters are the synergists. Fixators serve as a stabilizer of one part of the body during movement of another part. This allows the agonist muscle to work effectively by stabilizing the origin. The stabilizer allows the agonist to work effectively because where the origin is, it is now stable. So it's like your grounding is stable, therefore you can do your job. The antagonist are the muscles that work opposite to the prime movers. So they oppose or reverse the movement of the prime mover. So if you've got a muscle that flexes, the antagonist is typically the muscle that extends that same joint. So the antagonist is located on the opposite side of the joint to the prime mover. Prime movers, antagonists, synergists, and fixator muscles work together to produce smooth, coordinated, and precise movements. The role of the muscle depends on the movement being made. One muscle may act as a prime mover in one movement, or an antagonist for another, or a synergist for a different movement. So let's have a look. If we're looking at the triceps is the prime mover when I bring my arm back like this. It's the antagonist when I bring it forward. And it's the synergist when I start to bring my elbow in like this, because there's one of the heads of the triceps is on the humerus and it attaches to the scapula here. So it's part of that stabilizing process. If we look at the terms facilitation and inhibition, this occurs constantly as we utilize our muscles to move our bodies. The muscles tend to be arranged in pairs of agonist and antagonist on opposite sides of the bone or joint. Facilitation is the action of the prime mover to bring about a body movement. When the prime mover is activated or facilitated, the muscle testing it will give a locked response. Inhibition involves the relaxing of the antagonist to allow the coordinated movement. So if I'm bringing my arm forward like this, there's a contraction happening here. The inhibition has to happen here, or the arm can't come forward. You can't have two sides of the fulcrum pulling at the same time. Inhibition occurs in the relaxing of the antagonist. Reciprocal inhibition, if you've been reading up in other articles, that refers to the nerve impulses sent by the spindles of the agonist. So the prime mover, when it contracts, its spindles send a reciprocal bit of information to the antagonist to tell it to relax. It's pretty cool. Sometimes your antagonist will also contract slightly to regulate the action of the prime mover. So that prevents you from overshooting the mark or going too far. In the case of over-facilitation, as a kinesiology term, we deal with this in the second year. It refers to strong overactive muscles. When a muscle is over-facilitated, it will lock on when you test it. And even when you turn it off with spindles, it won't turn off. This may be referred to as a frozen muscle. So people who come to you and say, I have a frozen shoulder, they may have muscles that are over-facilitated that are constantly locked on. If we're talking about under-facilitated, then what you're getting is a weak or absent response in the prime mover. And that will give you an unlock when muscle tested. That can also be referred to as frozen because the person believes their arm can't do what they want it to do. So an example here is the role of the biceps is the prime mover that facilitates the flexion of the arm. The biceps is the agonist. For the movement to take place, the triceps, the antagonist, must be inhibited. If the triceps were not turned off, coordinated movement of the arm would not be possible. The synergist muscles are not shown in this particular diagram. Notice the biceps is on the front of the arm and the triceps is on the back of the arm. So now we're going to look at how recruitment occurs while we're muscle testing. First of all, you have to remember we're using the prime mover and we want to use just enough pressure to test the lock, which is no more than 1/3 of the power of the muscle, normally about 1 kilo of force. When you exceed this load, when you push too hard on this, or if the prime mover itself is under functioning, recruitment of synergist muscles can occur. The direction of the muscle test must follow the path of the prime mover. When you've got this under functioning thing happening in your prime mover, other muscles nearby will work together, these are the synergists, to cover up the apparent weakness in the muscle that's under functioning. The protective response is designed to keep the vulnerable, weaker parts of our body safe. So it's often a subconscious response that the client isn't aware that they're doing. So we're assessing not just the prime mover, but also the functioning of the synergist muscles as well. When you're testing, you place the muscle in the correct starting position, you provide the appropriate stabilizing support for the client, and when you test, you allow enough time to determine the lock without fatiguing the muscle unnecessarily. So you test for no more than 2 seconds, but you also don't want to come up and do the muscle test must actually test something. It can't be a bang. So some telltale signs that the client is using synergist muscles or recruiting include minor adjustments to the angle of the starting position. So you might say to your client, put your arm out in front, and this is the correct starting position, and the client puts it here. The other thing that can happen is the body can twist. So in the lat dorsi position, instead of just the arm twisting, you get a bit of the back twisting. Sometimes you'll see the client hold their breath. Sometimes you won't see it. And the way to overcome that is to ask them to breathe in and breathe out and hold. And usually you can't breathe out and hold a muscle that's under functioning. If you're getting a strong bounce response from the test, so this banging, it's not an actual unlock, it's a bouncy response. So all of these are signs that the person is using a synergist muscle to recruit. So in these cases, reduce the pressure of your testing. Check that you've set up the muscle test in the correct starting position and the range of testing, that you're not pushing too far. Go gently. And remember that the client often has no idea of what's going on. They don't know where you want them to put their arm. They don't know what they're trying to cover up. This is just the body trying to protect itself.